The IDF is not slowing down in Gaza despite ongoing ceasefire negotiations, saying it will continue targeting senior Hamas commanders throughout the Strip. In a joint statement, the military and Shin Bet announced today that they eliminated Hamas terrorist Mohammed Nasser Ali Kanita. Kanita held Israeli hostage Emily Damari captive in his home and participated in the October 7th attacks. He was active in Hamas military intelligence and was eliminated earlier in June in Gaza City. Our military correspondent David Maitland reports now on the latest developments on day 647 of the war in Gaza.
The Israel Defense Force has ramped up its activity on the Gaza war front over the past day, striking more than 100 terror targets, according to the military's latest statement. The target list included Hamas and Islamic Jihad operatives, structures utilized as terror bases, weapon depots, and tunnels. The strikes come as 5 IDF divisions made up of tens of thousands of troops continue to operate across the entirety of the Gaza Strip. The military describes some of their activities, like in the northern Gaza's Beit Hanun. Troops of the Givati Brigade destroyed a tunnel, while the 99th Division directed airstrikes to thwart the planting of roadside bombs. The IDF has also named the senior terrorists taken out in Gaza over the past 2 weeks, Hamas and Islamic Jihad commanders who were involved in the efforts to regroup. At the same time, the IDF acknowledged that a strike near a Gaza water distribution center was an accident with munitions that malfunctioned, as civilians were reported killed there. In a separate development, as plans emerge for a humanitarian city in Gaza that could hold around 600,000 people, Israeli military leaders had reportedly planned to warn the government's security cabinet Sunday night that the ambitious and controversial proposal could take months to implement and imperil the ongoing hostage talks. Now, Israeli streets are tense as everyone awaits some kind of announcement regarding the ceasefire talks that are still underway. Now, for the last week, Israeli and U.S. officials have expressed high levels of optimism in terms of those talks actually resulting in a deal in the near term. But for now, they seem stuck for the last 4 days on just where the IDF may withdraw to under the terms of any deal. Prime Minister Netanyahu, for his part, continues to vow that he'll seek the total elimination and defeat of Hamas in Gaza, their disarmament, and of course, the return of all the Israeli hostages.
Thank you, David, for the report. And U.S. President Donald Trump remains confident that a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza can be reached within a week. But the latest deadline comes after several earlier deadlines failed to materialize. More on this from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
Over the past several weeks, including the time before, during, and after the White House meetings with Prime Minister Netanyahu, Trump has repeatedly given timelines for a deal that have yet to materialize. In his latest comment, President Trump said this:
Gaza, we are talking, and hopefully we're going to get that straightened out over the next week. Let's see what happens.
U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff is also sounding hopeful and says he will be meeting with Qatari officials in the coming days to try to bring the deal to fruition. Witkoff and Trump's comments come as talks in Doha appear to be at a standstill, although Palestinian sources are saying it's too soon to call the mediated talks a failure. The source confirmed that Hamas is seeking what it calls improvements in certain provisions relating to the Israeli withdrawal from the city of Rafah on the southern border with Egypt. Israel is reportedly planning to submit new maps for potential ceasefire withdrawal lines that mediators are hoping can lead to a breakthrough. Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke to Fox News of the heavy costs in life of the Gaza war.
Look, anyone who has a son in Gaza understands that their life is on the line. And the cabinet ministers, I'm very proud of them, and the people of Israel are proud of them. They don't talk about it. Sometimes in hushed tones. Was your son there? Was your son here? Especially when you hear about casualties. So this is this is not a remote thing.
Netanyahu gives all indications that he is ready for a ceasefire and potentially for an end to the war, but not at any cost.
And Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas is also chiming in on the war in Gaza. Abbas is calling for the release of the hostages held by Hamas. During a meeting with former British Prime Minister Tony Blair in Amman, Abbas also called for Hamas to hand over its weapons and said that Hamas will not rule over the Gaza Strip after the ongoing war ends. He reportedly told the former British leader that there needs to be an immediate ceasefire that includes the release of Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails and unhindered entry of humanitarian aid to the enclave. Abbas called for Gaza to be handed over to the Palestinian Authority. a notion long rejected by Israel. And joining us now with more on the war in Gaza and beyond is Jonathan Shanzer, Executive Director at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So U.S. President Trump and U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff continue to express optimism that a deal can be reached within a week, although we did hear this last week as well. Do you share this optimism?
I wish I did. And really, my pessimism stems from the fact that the Qataris are the ones that are still brokering the majority of this. And of course, we know that the Qataris are state sponsors of terrorism as it relates to Hamas. By the way, not just Hamas, you could also add the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, ISIS. This is an extremist regime that has somehow insinuated itself with some of the top folks in the U.S. government. They trust the Qataris. They really should not trust the Qataris because at the end of the day, this is a regime that was spending $30 million a month to keep the Hamas terrorist organization intact. They were financing the group leading up all the way to the 10/7 attacks. They still have top leaders living in Doha, really at the pleasure of the Qatari government. And the Qatari government is doing whatever it can to ensure that Hamas remains in power. What we need right now is somebody to negotiate the release of every last hostage. All 50 hostages should be released in one fell swoop. And then from there, you could begin to talk about the exile of Hamas leadership from the Gaza Strip. That's how you get to calm in the region. Anything short of that, to me, strikes me as just woefully inadequate.
And so why is the Trump administration, despite everything that you've just mentioned, why are they cozying up to the Qataris rather than putting the pressure on them to get Hamas to free the hostages?
Look, I think that's kind of part of it is legacy, right? I mean, the Biden administration first enlisted the Qataris. And by the way, this is bipartisan. I don't want to single out the Trump administration. I don't want to single out the Biden administration. The Obama administration also worked with the Qataris. The Bush administration worked with the Qataris. We call them now a major non-NATO ally, despite the fact that they're state sponsors of terrorism. This is something that has just limped along now for a couple of decades, and it really must end. And so I don't know what it takes to wake up the U.S. government, the State Department, the Pentagon. I mean, I will say that part of this probably tracks back to the fact that the Al Udeid Air Base, America's largest air base, the Combined Air Operations Center, as we call it at Al Udeid, that is a valuable asset. It's worth something like $8 billion, and the Pentagon doesn't want to let go of it. And of course, the Qataris have flooded the United States with cash, higher education, K through 12, lobby firms, PR firms, national security, energy, you name it. They're all over the place, flooding the place with money. This is a country of 330,000 people that control something like 10 or 12% of the world's energy. So it's a value partner for us, but it is a deeply, deeply flawed one, and we need to revise that contract as soon as possible.
And I also want to ask about the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. The U.S. and Israel working very closely to ensure that aid reaches civilians and is not stolen by Hamas, as we've seen in the past. And now there's talk of a humanitarian city being established. I mean, what do you make of this, and what can you tell us about the humanitarian situation on the ground?
Look, I think that right now the battle to disperse aid could be the final battle that determines the fate of Hamas. You could look at their military, and let's just be frank that the vast majority of the commanders that were in charge of Hamas on October 7th are dead. They're gone, and they're not coming back, right? So what you have right now are a bunch of kids in tracksuits that are carrying out IED attacks and sniping at Israelis. And yes, urban warfare is brutal. Asymmetric warfare is brutal, and you're seeing Israeli soldiers being cut down in Gaza. But I think that the moment that Hamas loses control of the aid, that's the moment that they lose all agency in Gaza. They lose the ability to raise funds. They're cut off in so many different ways right now from their patrons and from one another. And so I think that what's happening right now on the humanitarian front is crucial. I think it's fascinating that we can talk about a humanitarian city without having the Arab world, absolutely erupt in fury. This was something that Donald Trump first talked about several months ago. Back then, everybody lost their minds when he mentioned it. Now it seems like people are kind of saying, all right, well, maybe we need this right now. Maybe this is important to try to bring about an end game in Gaza. And so I don't want to say I'm optimistic, but I would say that these are steps in the right direction. If we can get some of these processes in place, I do get a sense that an end game is finally potentially in view, that light at the end of the tunnel is possible.
Light at the end of the tunnel. Jonathan Shanzer, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Israel Bonds, the heartbeat of solidarity, the powerhouse of support. When the Israeli-Hamas war hit, Israel Bonds stood tall, proving we're more than just an investment, we're a lifeline. Israel Bonds pledges to ensure Israel thrives and flourishes. Investing in Israel Bonds isn't just a financial move, it's a declaration for resilience, strength, and a better future for Israel. Join us and let solidarity echo through generations.
And moving on, since October 7th, Israel has been engaged in an unprecedented seven-front war, an existential battle against all odds. Yet despite the overwhelming challenges, Israel has emerged victorious, cementing its position as a formidable military power in the Middle East. At the heart of this success lies not just Israel's military strategy, but its technological innovation. Israeli defense technologies, many of which have been developed by the nation's leading research institutions, have played a pivotal role in achieving this remarkable victory. One institution in particular that stands out, the Techneon, Israel Institute of Technology. The Techneon has been at the forefront of groundbreaking research that has saved countless lives, not only in Israel, but around the world. From life-saving defense technologies to cutting-edge medical innovations, the Techneon's contributions extend far beyond national borders. It's not just about protecting Israel, it's about safeguarding humanity. And as Israel continues to face unprecedented threats, the need for sustained investment in innovation has never been more critical. The minds driving this technological revolution, engineers, scientists, and researchers at the Techneon, are the key to a secure future. So if you want to learn more and contribute to the innovative work at the Techneon, you can scan the QR code on your screen now. And moving on, the cost of the war with Iran is now standing at a hefty price tag in Israel after thousands of people's homes and neighborhoods were destroyed by Iranian ballistic missiles. ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian is standing by in the heart of Tel Aviv, where the devastation is still on full display there. Shosh.
Lidar, you mentioned the price tag of this war of being enormous. It's not only the hefty price that now comes with this severe damage, it's also people having to clean up, pick up the pieces of where their lives used to be. As you can see behind me, we're standing in Tel Aviv, where there is still immense damage to these apartment buildings that were absolutely decimated by the velocity of these Iranian ballistic missiles. Right here where I am standing, this is one of the hardest hit areas by the war with Iran. It's been 1 month since the war with Iran began, and up to 50,000 claims have been made by individuals and businesses so far for property damages from Iranian ballistic missiles. Tel Aviv was one of the hardest hit areas, with nearly 30,000 claims from individuals and more than 18,000 from damaged businesses. The tax authority has so far paid out 305 million shekels in claims, and so far the top 3 cities to file those claims are Tel Aviv, Ramat Gan, and Rehovot. Meanwhile, the city of Rehovot is mourning a tragic loss after a Filipino caregiver just died on Sunday after succumbing to her injuries after an Iranian ballistic missile hit her home on June 15th. Leah Mosquera was 49 years old and was in serious condition after the missile hit her apartment. For the last month, she's had several surgeries and was recovering in the ICU. The Filipino embassy said her body was transported back to the Philippines for burial. And Lidar, a focal point of conversation for thousands of Israelis right now throughout the country is where they will go next if another ballistic missile attack happens like this. Again, the conversation of protected spaces, the accessibility to them. We know that the mamad, the private shelter in people's apartments, costs about $60,000 just to construct. Right now, the conversation is how can this price be more affordable for people to make sure that they are safe in possible future wars. Lidar?
Thank you, Shosh. And moving on, the IDF has announced that it recently struck several tanks in southern Syria. And IDF troops in the Syrian-occupied side of Mount Hermon have found and seized tons of weapons. The army announced that troops recently raided several military facilities belonging to the former Syrian regime. The IDF said that the 810th Mountain Regional Brigade, located at the peak of Mount Hermon, raided several key headquarters belonging to the former commando forces of the al-Assad regime. At the sites, the forces found 3 tons of weapons, including anti-tank mines, explosive devices, and rockets. The army has been deployed to 9 posts inside southern Syria since the fall of the al-Assad regime in December. Troops have been operating up to 15 kilometers into Syrian territory. And the IDF says the operations are intended to prevent weapons smuggling into Lebanon from Syria. And moving on, skyrocketing levels of anti-Semitism are continuing to climb globally, with anti-Jewish and anti-Israel tropes on full display on vacation destinations, children's shows, and at music festivals. ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian reports on the incidents that have recently taken shape and the impact it's had on the global Jewish community.
Death to the IDF!
You've heard it at music festivals in the United Kingdom, where thousands of people joined in on anti-Israel and anti-Semitic chants targeting Jewish people at the Glastonbury Festival in June. You've likely also seen it in Australia, where a man set the door of a Melbourne synagogue on fire, where a group of 20 people were having a Shabbat dinner during the attack. It was just 1 kilometer away from where a popular Israeli restaurant was stormed by 20 protesters chanting hateful slogans in early July, like death to the IDF. Anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, and anti-Israel attacks are continuing to happen throughout the world, not behind closed doors, but out in the public. On Sunday, the X account of the famous children's puppet Elmo was apparently hacked, spreading anti-Semitic views and rants. The hacker began posting about a crypto company, but turned the post into rage, calling for the violence against Jewish people. Although the posts were removed from Elmo's account within an hour, the Sesame Workshop spokesperson told Fox News Digital, quote, Elmo's X account was compromised today by an unknown hacker who posted disgusting messages, including anti-Semitic and racist posts. Meanwhile, in Athens, Greece, a brand new Israeli kosher restaurant was just vandalized over the weekend by attackers wearing masks who graffitied anti-Israel slogans on the walls and counters of the restaurant, calling the IDF rapists and murderers, and that, quote, no Zionist is safe here. The owner of the restaurant called the agitators pro-Palestinian anarchists. He also said the staff working in the restaurant at the time of the attack were all from Greece. Authorities in Greece are now treating it as a possible hate crime. And leaving the shores of Sicily again is a new Freedom Flotilla carrying pro-Palestinian activists and a small amount of humanitarian aid, with hopes of arriving to Gaza on Sunday. 15 people are part of this ship belonging to an international non-violent movement in support of Palestinians.
And joining us now with more on the spike in anti-Semitism around the world is Executive Director of Stand With Us England, Isaac Salati. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So since October 7th and even before, we've witnessed anti-Semitism, right? But the past few months, it seems to have really escalated, with people openly shouting, you know, death to the IDF, death to Jews. It's no longer hidden. It's sort of out in the open and is seemingly becoming normalized. I mean, what is your take on this? Has anti-Semitism become normalized in Western society?
Anti-Semitism was always exists, but obviously the war in Gaza pushing people towards hating Israel even more than in the past. And I think that the name of the game is pushing boundaries. And people who always hated Israel trying to do more, trying to take more extreme measures in violence and in protests. And the big question is, what are the Western countries are doing in order to countering those attacks? And the sad answer is not enough, because when you see governments containing those protests, calling for the annihilation of Israel, and I'm putting aside the political discourse right now, but calling to the annihilation of any sovereign state is something that should be outside of the of any normal conversation in normal society. Now they are letting those chants and those protests to continue under the freedom of expression. So I think that by doing so, they're signaling people that they can push the boundaries even more towards violence, and that's what we see around the world recently.
And we see also very often that it's not only about Jews, it's not only anti-Semitism, that's just the first step. It's also very often anti-West. Are people waking up to this fact in the Western world? And what can even be done at this point to counter it? I mean, you said that governments are not doing enough. What can be done to counter it?
So when you speak with university leaders and when you speak with professors and with decision makers, you realize that the hate towards Israel, as you said very correctly, is linked into anti-West values. And the sad situation is that in university, this hatred toward the West, leading by the hatred to Israel, became an academic topic. Professors are teaching about it. It became a popular and very attractive topic the students are choosing to study. And we're basically planting the seeds for the future, because the students that you see today in universities will be tomorrow's leaders. And one only may ask, what will happen in the future when these people will be in parliaments, judges, and in the media? And I think that we see, the first growing seeds today in the parliament, the UK parliament, we see it in the US. So I think that governments in the West has to understand, as you said, that Israel is only the first station in a much longer journey toward hatred and toward putting the West on the target. Yeah.
And so often lately, we hear people throw around the phrase, it's too late for the UK, it's too late for Europe. It's actually a very serious and grave statement to make when you think about it. I mean, do you agree that there is no future for Jews in the UK anymore?
Time will tell. I can tell you that from what we recognized, we see more and more Jews that maybe in a year ago or 2 years ago used to say it among closed rooms, and today they're speaking about it publicly, that are not planning to stay in the UK, for instance. People are actually scared. I'm familiar with lots of students who are thinking twice before going and studying specific university that usually lead with a lot of anti-Semitic attacks. So eventually that will lead Jews to move from one place to another.
Absolutely. Isaac Salati, thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 22 degrees Celsius or 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see clear skies alongside high temperatures of 34 degrees Celsius or 93 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and our new live channel, and you can also catch us on Screen IL with 24/7 live coverage. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Lidar Gravelazi. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.